Laughter cut through the frozen air, each breath turning to white vapor in the blizzard. A gaunt girl stood beside a rifle nearly as long as her body, drowning in an oversized camouflage parka. Her boots were too big. Her gloves hung loose at the fingertips. No one believed she could survive a single night out here, let alone save an entire SEAL platoon pinned down by hostile fire. But minutes later, the laughter died. One by one, terrorists dropped into the snow, never knowing who killed them. Lieutenant Carter Hayes pressed his back against the frozen rock face, feeling the vibrations of incoming fire ripple through the stone. His radio crackled with static and broken syllables, half of Command's transmission lost to the storm. "Say again, Command. You're breaking up." More static. Then 3 words came through clear. "Reinforcement. 17 minutes. Harper. 17 minutes. They might not have 17 seconds if the enemy flanked their position. The blizzard had turned the Afghan valley into a white void. Visibility was 30 meters at best. His team of 8 SEALs was pinned in a natural alcove, surrounded on 3 sides by hostiles who knew the terrain better than any satellite map could show. Sergeant Marcus Webb crawled up beside him, blood seeping through a hasty bandage on his shoulder. "We've got movement northeast, maybe 15-20 fighters. They're tightening the circle." Hayes checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left. Around him, his men were in similar shape, low on ammo. One man with a through-and-through leg wound, another with cracked ribs from the initial ambush. They'd been sent to extract a CIA asset. Instead, they'd walked into a coordinated trap. The radio crackled again. "Hawkeye 6, reinforcement is 1 individual. Call sign, Sparrow. ETA 12 minutes. Webb's eyebrows shot up. "1 person? In this?" Before Hayes could respond, Corpsman Danny Martinez spoke up from where he was treating the wounded. "Did they say Sparrow? I've heard that call sign. Sniper out of some classified program." "Great," Webb muttered. "Another ghost with a rifle who thinks they're—" The rest of his sentence was drowned out by a burst of automatic fire that chipped fragments off the rock above their heads. 11 minutes felt like an hour. When the figure finally appeared through the curtain of snow, Hayes initially thought it was a local shepherd who'd gotten lost. The person was small, barely 5'5". The parka seemed to swallow them whole. Then he saw the rifle. It was a custom bolt action, the kind that cost more than a new car. Suppressor longer than most men's forearms. The scope alone probably weighed 10 pounds. "Hawkeye 6? The voice was young. Female. Calm as a frozen lake. "That's us," Hayes called back. "You're Sparrow?" She nodded once, scanning their position with eyes that didn't match her face. Her face was smooth, unlined a kid's face, but her eyes were old, ancient, even. Webb limped closer, wincing with each step. He looked her up and down, then barked a laugh. "Command sent us a kid?" "I'm 17, she said flatly. "Not defensive, just factual." The laughter spread through the team. Not cruel, exactly more the kind of laughter that comes from exhausted men in an impossible situation being handed an impossible solution. 17, Webb repeated, shaking his head. "Jesus Christ, what's next? They gonna send us a Boy Scout troop?" She didn't smile, didn't frown. She simply unslung the rifle and moved to the edge of their position, studying the terrain through the snowfall. Hayes moved beside her. Up close, he could see she was even younger than 17, or maybe just malnourished. Her cheekbones stood out sharp beneath wind-burned skin. "Listen," he said, trying to sound diplomatic. "I don't know what Command told you, but we're in a seriously bad position here. We've got 20-plus hostiles with high ground and home field advantage. We need extraction, not—" "I know what you need," she interrupted, her breath steady despite the altitude and cold. "You need their commander dead. You need their communications disrupted. You need them scared." She said it the way someone might say they needed milk from the store. "Kid, no offense, but don't call me kid. Still no emotion, just a boundary being drawn. And don't waste time explaining things I already know. How many wounded?" 3. 1 serious. She nodded, processing. "They'll try to overrun you before dark. That's 90 minutes from now. I can cut their numbers before then." Martinez had joined them now, medical bag still in hand. "You're going out there, alone? That's the job." Webb snorted. "The job? You even old enough to drive?" For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, something colder. "I've been doing this job since I was 12. How long have you been a SEAL, Sergeant?" The question landed like a slap. Webb's jaw tightened. Hayes stepped between them. "Everyone calm down. Sparrow, we appreciate the backup, but—" "I don't need your appreciation. she said, already moving away. I need your fire discipline. When I start working, you stay quiet and low. Don't give away my position by reacting. She was checking her rifle now, movements practiced and precise despite the oversized gloves, adjusting the scope, chambering a round, every motion economical, no wasted energy. Where are you going? Hayes asked. She pointed to a rocky outcrop 300 meters north, barely visible through the snow. There, wind's coming from the west. I'll have angle on their staging area. That's a suicide position. You'll be completely exposed. No, she said simply. I'll be exactly where they won't look. And then she was gone, melting into the blizzard like she'd never been there at all. Webb stared after her. That kid's gonna get herself killed. Hayes didn't answer. He was watching the spot where she disappeared, wondering if command had just sent them a ghost or a miracle. Either way, they'd know soon enough. Through his scope, Hayes tracked the small figure moving across the snowfield. She didn't run. Running created patterns, drew eyes. Instead, she moved in fits and starts 5 meters of smooth motion, then absolute stillness, then another burst of movement at a different angle. It was predator movement, the kind you saw in nature documentaries about wolves. I lost her, Webb said, lowering his binoculars. How the hell did I lose her? Martinez was watching too. She's using the terrain. See how she's staying in the deeper snow? Harder to spot, and it muffles sound. You're defending her now? I'm observing her. There's a difference. Hayes kept watching. The girl had reached the outcrop, or at least, he thought she had. The snow was falling harder now, reducing visibility to almost nothing. For all he knew, she could be anywhere. A burst of gunfire erupted from the east. The enemy was probing their defenses again, testing for weak points. Hold fire, Hayes commanded. Let them waste ammo. But his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about that rifle the girl carried. Custom build, probably $500,000 worth of precision engineering. You didn't give weapons like that to children playing soldier. You gave them to people who knew how to use them. 300 meters away, Harper Vance pressed herself flat against the frozen rock, letting her breathing slow to almost nothing. The outcrop was exactly what she needed. Solid cover behind, clear sight lines ahead, and a natural dip that would hide her muzzle flash from most angles. The snow would do the rest. She'd stopped correcting people about her age years ago. Let them think she was 17. The truth that she'd turned 16 3 months ago wouldn't make them take her more seriously. If anything, it would make things worse. Age didn't matter anyway. Not really. What mattered was the hundreds of hours logged in simulation, the countless live fire exercises, the way her fingers knew every inch of her rifle like a pianist knew their keys. What mattered was that her first confirmed kill had been at age 12, when insurgents had stormed the orphanage, where she'd been living after her parents died in a bombing. She'd picked up a guard's rifle, aimed at the center mass of a man twice her size, pulled the trigger. The memory didn't haunt her. That was the strange part. It should have. Therapists said so. But all she felt was the same cold certainty she felt now: do the job, or die trying. Through her scope, she began cataloging targets. The enemy had set up a staging area in the ruins of an old village. Smart positioned stone walls for cover, multiple exits, elevated position. She counted 18 fighters visible, probably more inside the structures. She spotted the commander almost immediately. Older than the others, expensive sat phone clipped to his belt, 2 bodyguards flanking him. He was pointing at a map, giving orders. Priority target, but not yet. First, she needed to map their positions. Identify the machine gunners, the RPG operators, the ones who posed the greatest threat to the pinned SEAL team. The wind shifted, coming harder from the northwest. She'd need to adjust for that, and the temperature had dropped another 5 degrees in the last 20 minutes. Cold air meant denser air meant the bullet would fly slightly different. Her fingers were steady as she made the calculations. Math had always come easy to her. The orphanage teachers used to say she could have been an engineer, a scientist. Instead, she was this, a ghost in the snow with a rifle and a list of people who needed to die. Back at the SEAL position, the waiting was becoming unbearable. How long are we supposed to just sit here? Webb demanded. Until she makes her move, Hayes said. Or until they make theirs. This is insane. We're trusting our lives to a teenager. Martinez looked up from where he was rebandaging the wounded soldier's leg. You trusted your life to me when I was 19 and fresh out of corpsman school. That's different. Webb didn't have an answer for that. The radio crackled. A new voice younger than expected. Hawkeye 6, this is Sparrow. I have 18 confirmed hostiles. Recommend you prepare for immediate suppression once I engage. They'll panic first, then they'll try to rush your position. Hayes grabbed the radio. Copy that, Sparrow. What's your timeline? 30 seconds. Webb's eyes went wide. 30 seconds? She's been out there less than 10 minutes. But Hayes was already positioning his team, directing them to cover the most likely approach routes. If the girl was right about the enemy rushing them, they needed to be ready. 20 seconds. Sparrow's voice came through, utterly calm. Primary target is the commander. After that, I'll work east to west. Count the shots. 12 total. Martinez frowned. 12? She said. 18 hostiles. Maybe she's being conservative, Hayes muttered, though he didn't believe it. 10 seconds. The world seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind died down for a moment. Then, through the snow and distance, came a sound so quiet that Hayes almost missed it. A single crack, like a branch breaking far away. Through his binoculars, he saw a figure collapse in the enemy staging area. The commander, dead before he hit the ground. Holy shit, Webb whispered. Another crack. Another body dropped. The enemy was shouting now, diving for cover, trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. Crack. Crack. 2 more down. She's not missing, Martinez said, his voice filled with something between awe and horror. She's not missing a single shot. Hayes watched through his scope as chaos erupted in the enemy position. They were firing wildly into the storm, hitting nothing but air and snow. Meanwhile, Sparrow continued her work with methodical precision. Crack. 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 By the time the 8th shot rang out, the remaining hostiles were in full retreat, abandoning their positions and running blindly into the blizzard. Hold fire, Hayes commanded his team. Let them run. 4 more shots followed the fleeing fighters. Then, silence. Hayes counted to 60. Then another 60. The radio crackled. Hawkeye 6. Area is clear. 12 confirmed kills. 6 scattered into the valley. They won't regroup before dark. Webb lowered his weapon, his face pale. She just cleared an entire hostile position, alone, in a blizzard. Hayes keyed his radio. Sparrow, return to our position. Well done. Negative. I'm moving to Overwatch. There's a second group 2 kilometers south. I'll keep them pinned until extraction arrives. Sparrow, you've done enough. Come back. For the first time, he heard something like emotion in her voice. Not pride, not satisfaction, exhaustion. This is what I do, Lieutenant. It's all I know how to do. Then the radio went quiet, and the ghost was gone again. The brief respite didn't last. Hayes knew it wouldn't. In his 8 years as a SEAL, he'd learned that in combat, you never got more than a few minutes to breathe before the next crisis hit. This time, it came from the south. Contact! One of his men shouted. Multiple vehicles, heavy weapons! Through the falling snow, Hayes could make out the shapes of 3 technical trucks, pickup trucks, with heavy machine guns mounted in the beds. They were moving fast, flanking wide to cut off any escape route. How many fighters? He called out. At least 20, maybe more in the trucks. Webb cursed viciously. We don't have the ammo for this. He was right. Between the initial ambush and holding their position for the last hour, they'd burned through most of their magazines. Hayes did quick math in his head. If each man had 2 mags left, they were looking at maybe 300 rounds total, against 20-plus hostiles with mounted machine guns. The numbers didn't work. His radio crackled. Hawkeye, 6. I have eyes on the vehicles. Sparrow, where are you? South Ridge, 800 meters from your position. I can slow them down. 800 meters in this weather. In this terrain. The girl had covered more ground than should have been possible. Negative, Hayes said. Those machine guns will tear you apart if they spot you. They won't spot me. There was that absolute certainty again. No bravado, no false confidence. Just cold, factual assessment. Sparrow, with respect, Lieutenant, I'm not under your command. I'm here to complete a mission. Let me complete it. The first technical had stopped about 400 meters out. The machine gunner was already traversing his weapon, looking for targets. Hayes made a decision. Fine, but coordinate with us. We'll draw their attention. You take the gunners. Understood. He turned to his team. When I give the word, I want suppressing fire on those trucks. Make them think twice about charging us. But conserve ammo 3-round bursts maximum. Webb took position behind a boulder, his wounded shoulder clearly causing him pain. This is still a suicide play. You have a better idea? Yeah. Pray that kid is as good as she thinks she is. The technical's machine gun opened up, sending a stream of tracers arcing toward their position. Rounds impacted the rocks around them, throwing up fragments of stone and ice. "Now," Hayes ordered. His team returned fire in controlled bursts. Not enough to do real damage at this range, but enough to make the enemy think twice. The second technical swung wide, trying to flank from the east. The third stayed back, probably carrying the commander for this new force. Through his scope, Hayes watched the first machine gunner adjust his aim. Then the man's head snapped back, and he collapsed into the truck bed. The distinctive crack of Sparrow's rifle came a second later, delayed by distance. "Target down," her voice came through the radio, still utterly calm despite the chaos. The remaining fighters were shouting, confused. The second technical's gunner started firing blindly into the hills, trying to suppress a sniper he couldn't see. Another crack. Another body dropped. "This is impossible," Martinez said, watching through binoculars. "The range, the weather, the moving targets, this should be impossible." But Sparrow wasn't done. The third technical tried to retreat, its driver realizing they were sitting ducks. The truck lurched backward, snow spraying from its tires. Crack. The driver slumped over the wheel. The truck veered sideways, crashed into a boulder, and stopped. "3 for 3, Webb muttered. "She's 3 for 3 on moving targets in a blizzard." Hayes was already thinking tactically. With the machine gunners down, the remaining fighters would either try to rush their position on foot or retreat entirely. Either way, the immediate threat was neutralized. "Sparrow, status? I'm repositioning. They'll try to find me now. Give me 60 seconds. "Copy that." But the enemy didn't wait 60 seconds. A man emerged from behind the disabled third technical, and Hayes felt his stomach drop. "Get down!" he screamed. The rocket streaked through the air, trailing smoke. It impacted the rock face above their position, and the world turned into noise and dust and flying debris. When Hayes could see again, his ears were ringing, and blood was running down the side of his face from where a rock fragment had grazed his temple. "Sound off," he called out. His team responded one by one, shaken but alive. The man with the RPG was already reloading. Hayes brought his rifle up, knowing the range was too far for an accurate shot with their weapons. Then Sparrow's voice came through his radio, and for the first time, he heard urgency in it. "I don't have the angle. He's behind the vehicle. I need him to move." "We're working on it," Hayes shouted back, firing a burst that pinged off the technical's armor but didn't hit the man behind it. The RPG gunner rose up to take aim. Hayes saw his own death in that moment, saw the rocket leaving the tube, saw it arcing toward their position, saw the end. Then a strange thing happened. One of the remaining enemy fighters, a young man, maybe 20, suddenly ran from his cover, sprinting toward the SEAL position with his rifle raised and screaming something in Pashto. It was a suicide charge, brave and stupid in equal measure. It also pulled the RPG gunner's attention for just a second. He turned his head to watch his comrades charge. Just a second. Crack. The RPG gunner fell, his weapon clattering unfired to the ground. Hayes didn't hesitate. He put 3 rounds into the charging fighter, dropping him 10 meters short of their position. Silence fell over the valley again, broken only by the wind. "Clear," Sparrow's voice said quietly. "All threats neutralized." Hayes counted bodies through his scope, 8 down around the vehicles. The rest had fled into the storm. "Return to position," he ordered. "You've earned a break." No response. "Sparrow, do you copy?" Still nothing. Webb grabbed the radio. "Sparrow, respond." After a long moment, her voice came through, different now. Strained. "Negative. I'm pinned. They got smart." Hayes felt ice in his stomach. "What's your situation?" 4 fighters, maybe 5. They flanked while I was focused on the RPGs. I'm in cover, but I can't move without exposing myself. And she paused. "I'm almost out of ammunition." Hayes made the decision in half a second. "Webb, Martinez, you're with me. Rest of you, hold this position and cover our extraction route." "Sir, we don't have the numbers for a rescue op," one of his men protested. "I'm not leaving her out there." Webb was already up, checking his rifle despite his wounded shoulder. Finally, something that makes sense. They moved out into the storm, using the same route Sparrow had taken earlier. The snow was deeper now, the wind stronger. Hayes could barely see 10 meters ahead. His radio crackled. "Hawkeye 6, negative on rescue attempt. You'll expose your team." "That's not your call to make," Hayes shot back. "It's exactly my call. I'm the asset. You're the primary mission." The primary mission just changed. Martinez was running point, following the barely visible tracks Sparrow had left in the snow. The kid moved like she weighed nothing. Her footprints were shallow, spaced far apart. Professional. They found her position 5 minutes later. She was wedged into a natural crevice in the rocks, her rifle pointed downslope toward where the enemy fighters had her pinned. 2 empty magazines lay in the snow beside her. When she turned to look at them, Hayes finally saw past the cold exterior. She was terrified, not of dying. He'd seen enough combat to recognize that particular fear, and this wasn't it. She was terrified of failing. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice tight. "Tough," Webb replied, taking position beside her. "You saved our asses twice. Time to return the favor." Hayes scanned the slope below. He could see movement 4 fighters, maybe 5, using the terrain to advance up the hill. They were being smart about it, moving in bounds, covering each other. "How many rounds you have left?" he asked Sparrow. 4. 4 rounds, against 5 targets, and she'd need to make every shot count because once she fired, they'd know exactly where she was. "Okay," Hayes said, formulating a plan. "On my mark, we light them up with everything we've got. Sparrow, you take whoever's left standing." She nodded, but he saw her hands trembling slightly as she checked her rifle. Not from fear. From exhaustion. How long had she been out here? How many shots had she taken? He'd counted 12 from the first engagement, 3 from the vehicles, at least 4 more covering their position. This kid had been in sustained combat for over an hour in sub-zero temperatures. "Wait," Martinez said suddenly. "Contact rear." Hayes spun around. 3 more fighters had flanked them from the north. They'd been so focused on the ones downslope that they'd missed the ones coming from behind. They were surrounded. Webb let out a dark laugh. Well, shit. Sparrow was looking between both groups of enemies, doing calculations in her head. Hayes could almost see her running the numbers, ammunition, angles, time, distance. Then she stood up. "What are you doing?" Hayes hissed. "Get down! I need a clear line of sight. They'll see you." "That's the point." She raised her rifle, and Hayes understood what she was doing. She was making herself the target, drawing their fire so the SEALs could move. "No," he said firmly. "We don't sacrifice team members. That's not how this works." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Hayes saw something in her eyes that made his chest ache. "You have teammates," she said quietly. "I just have the mission." Before he could respond, she fired. One of the upslope fighters dropped. 3 rounds left. The enemy opened up with everything they had. Rounds snapped past Hayes' head, impacted the rocks around them. He returned fire, as did Webb and Martinez, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Sparrow worked the bolt on her rifle with mechanical precision. Crack. 2 rounds left. Crack. 1 round left. The enemy was closing in from both sides now. Hayes' rifle clicked empty. He drew his sidearm, knowing it was futile at this range. Sparrow chambered her final round. She had 1 bullet left and at least 4 targets still standing. The math didn't work. She took aim downslope, where the biggest threat was advancing a man with an RPG, learning from his predecessor's mistake and staying mobile. Hayes saw her finger tighten on the trigger. Then a strange sound cut through the chaos. Rotor blades. 2 Apache helicopters screamed over the ridgeline, their 30mm chain guns already spooling up. The cavalry had arrived. The Apaches made 3 passes. That was all it took. When the guns fell silent, the snow was stained red in a dozen places. The enemy fighters who weren't dead were fleeing down the valley, abandoning weapons and wounded alike in their panic. Hayes watched through his scope as one of the helicopters circled back, its pilot clearly looking for the team that had called in the strike. His radio crackled with a new voice, older, authoritative. "Hawkeye 6, this is Thunder 1. We have you visual. Extraction is inbound, 5 minutes. Copy that, Thunder 1. Thanks for the save. Thank your sniper. Her laser designation was the only reason we found you in this soup." Hayes turned to Sparrow. She was sitting with her back against the rocks now, rifle across her lap, eyes closed. For a moment he thought she might be wounded. Then he realized she was just empty. Completely, utterly drained. Webb limped over, his face pale from blood loss and exhaustion. He looked at the girl, then at the valley below where 15 enemy fighters lay dead in the snow. "Hey kid," he said, his voice softer than Hayes had ever heard it. "You did good." She opened her eyes. "Don't call me kid." But there was no fire in it this time, just reflex. Martinez was checking her over with a medic's practiced eye. "You hit? You sure? Because you're shaking pretty bad." "Cold." Martinez pulled out an emergency blanket from his pack and wrapped it around her shoulders. She didn't resist. The extraction helicopter appeared through the storm, a Chinook, its twin rotors beating the snow into a whirlwind. It touched down 50 meters from their position. Hayes helped Sparrow to her feet. She wobbled, and he realized she probably weighed less than 100 pounds fully geared up. How she'd carried that rifle across kilometers of mountain terrain was beyond him. As they moved toward the helicopter, Webb walked beside her. "I'm sorry," he said, "for laughing, for not taking you seriously." She glanced at him. "You weren't wrong to doubt. Most people my age couldn't do this, but you can. I don't have a choice." The statement hung in the air, full of implications Hayes didn't fully understand. They climbed aboard the Chinook. The crew chief took one look at Sparrow and immediately brought her a thermos of coffee and a heating pack. As the helicopter lifted off, Hayes sat down beside her. Through the open door, he could see the valley falling away beneath them, a white expanse dotted with the dark shapes of the dead. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She nodded, hands wrapped around the coffee. "How long have you really been doing this?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My parents were aid workers. They died when I was 8, bombing in Kabul. I was in the building when it happened." Hayes felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I spent the next 4 years in an orphanage. Then insurgents attacked it, killed the guards, killed some of the other kids. I picked up a rifle." She paused. "I was 12. "Jesus," Webb whispered. "Someone from the government found me after. Said I had a gift. Asked if I wanted to use it. I said yes." "That's not a choice," Hayes said. "That's exploitation." "Maybe." She looked out at the mountains. "Or maybe it's the only thing that made sense of what happened. The only way to make the deaths mean something." Martinez shook his head. "You're 16 years old. You should be worried about school dances and—" "I'm not 16, she interrupted. "I turned 16 in 3 months. I lied on my paperwork." The SEAL team fell silent. 15 years old. This ghost who'd saved their lives, who'd dropped terrorists with surgical precision, who'd operated with the calm professionalism of a 20-year veteran. She was 15 years old. "Does command know?" Hayes asked. "Someone does. Someone approved me for this." "That's insane." She looked at him with those ancient eyes. "Is it? I completed the mission. I saved your team. Would you feel better about it if I was 18? 25? 30? Would the results be any different?" Hayes didn't have an answer for that. The helicopter banked east, heading for the forward operating base. Through the window, the sun was starting to set, turning the storm clouds orange and purple. Sparrow finished her coffee and set the thermos down. She still had her rifle across her lap, and Hayes noticed for the first time that it had scratches and wear marks. This wasn't a new weapon. She'd been using it for years. "What happens now?" he asked. "Debrief. Medical check. New assignment in a week, maybe 2. Where will they send you?" "Wherever someone needs killing from a long way off." The brutal honesty of the statement was somehow worse than any euphemism would have been. Webb leaned forward. "You ever think about doing something else? After this?" "After what?" "After the war. After all this." She smiled, but it was the saddest expression Hayes had ever seen. "There is no after," she said quietly. "This is what I am. A weapon. You don't ask a weapon what it wants to do after the war." The Chinook touched down at FOB Serpent just as full dark descended. Medical personnel were already waiting, but Sparrow waved them off. "I'm fine. Check the wounded SEALs first." Hayes watched her walk across the tarmac, still carrying that massive rifle. She moved like every step required conscious effort, the adrenaline crash hitting hard now that she was safe. A man in civilian clothes was waiting by the operations center. Late 40s, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much. When Sparrow approached, he didn't smile or offer congratulations. He just said, "Report. Mission successful. SEAL team extracted. 15 enemy KIA, multiple dispersed. No friendly casualties attributable to my actions. You exposed yourself in the final engagement. Tactical necessity. We'll discuss that in debrief." The man, clearly her handler, glanced at Hayes. "Thank you for bringing her back, Lieutenant." "She brought herself back," Hayes replied. "We just helped with the last part." The handler nodded and walked away, Sparrow following. She didn't look back. Webb appeared at Hayes' elbow. "That's it? No thanks? No acknowledgement?" "She doesn't want acknowledgement," Hayes said. "She wants to disappear." They watched until she entered the operations building and the door closed behind her. Martinez came up on Hayes' other side, fresh bandage on his arm. "I looked into that program she's from. Off-book, black budget, run by people whose names don't appear on any roster. They recruit kids from war zones, orphans, mostly. Train them for specialized operations. That's illegal, Webb said. Only if someone admits it exists. Hayes felt sick. So, she's what? A child soldier? Technically, she's a contractor. The paperwork probably says she's 18. She's 15. On paper, she's whatever they need her to be. They walked toward the mess hall in silence. Around them, the base was alive with activity, soldiers rotating in and out, helicopters being serviced, the constant background hum of a military installation at war. Somewhere in all that noise, a 15-year-old girl was being debriefed about the lives she'd taken that day. Hayes couldn't shake the image of her face when she'd said there was no after, like she'd already accepted she was going to die doing this. 3 days later, Hayes was in the operations center when he saw her again. She was getting into a helicopter, same rifle, same oversized parka. Different mission, probably different valley, definitely different people who needed to die. He almost didn't go out to talk to her. But then he thought about Webb's laughter on that mountainside. About all the times people had looked at her and seen a child instead of a soldier. About the fact that she'd saved 8 lives and would probably never receive any formal recognition for it. He jogged across the tarmac. Sparrow. She turned. Up close, he could see she'd lost weight in just 3 days. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of nightmares or insomnia or both. Lieutenant, I wanted to say thank you. Properly. You saved my team. Just doing my job. It's more than that. He held out a small object, a SEAL team patch, the same one he wore on his uniform. You earned this. You're part of the team. She looked at the patch like it was a foreign object. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I'm not part of your team. I'm not part of anyone's team. That's the point. The point of what? Of being a ghost. You can't form attachments. You can't be remembered. You just do the job and move on. The helicopter's engines were spooling up now. They had to raise their voices to be heard. That's no way to live, Hayes shouted. I'm not living, she shouted back. I'm surviving. There's a difference. She turned to go, and Hayes did something impulsive. He grabbed her arm gently, but firmly enough to stop her. Listen to me. What happened to you, what they did to you, it's not right. You know that, don't you? She looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. What they did to me was give me purpose. Without this, I'm just another orphan in another refugee camp. With this, I'm saving lives, at the cost of your own. The simple admission was devastating. Hayes let go of her arm. If you ever want out, if you ever need help, you contact me. Understand? She nodded, but they both knew she never would. She climbed into the helicopter. Hayes stepped back as it lifted off, watching it disappear into the gray sky. Webb had come out to watch as well. You think we'll see her again? I hope not, Hayes said honestly. I hope she finds a way out of this before it kills her. And if she doesn't? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then someday, some other SEAL team will owe their lives to a ghost they barely saw. And they'll laugh at first, when they hear she's just a kid. And then the laughter will stop. He turned and walked back to the operations center, the weight of the patch still in his pocket. Behind him, the helicopter carrying Sparrow, real name Harper Vance. Age 15 years and 9 months, grew smaller and smaller until it was just a speck against the clouds. Then it was gone entirely. 2 weeks later, Hayes received an after-action report. It was heavily redacted black bars covering most of the text. But a few details came through clearly. Operation. Ghost dance. Asset. Sparrow. Enemy Kia. Dvanast. Friendly casualties. 0. Mission status. Success. 12 kills. Exactly what she'd said she'd deliver. The report didn't mention her age. Didn't mention that she weighed less than most of the gear she carried. Didn't mention the exhaustion in her eyes or the tremor in her hands when the adrenaline wore off. It just recorded the numbers. Because in the end, that was all that mattered to the people running her. Not the person, just the weapon. Hayes filed the report and tried not to think about it. But late at night, when he couldn't sleep, he found himself wondering where she was. What valley? What mountain? What mission? And whether she was still alive. The official medal ceremony happened 6 months later, back at the team's home base in Virginia. Hayes and his team received Bronze Stars for their actions during the extraction operation. The citation mentioned hostile forces, difficult terrain, and tactical excellence under fire. It didn't mention a 15-year-old sniper. She didn't exist on paper, never had, never would. But during the ceremony, when the general pinned the medal to Hayes's chest, he found himself scanning the crowd, looking for a small figure in an oversized jacket, ancient eyes and a young face. She wasn't there. Of course she wasn't there. After the ceremony, Webb pulled Hayes aside. "You still thinking about her?" "Every day." "Yeah, me too." They stood in silence for a moment. "I looked into that program again," Webb said. "Called in some favors, talked to some people who owed me. They shut it down." 4 months ago, congressional inquiry, classified, whole thing got buried. Hayes felt his pulse quicken. What happened to the assets? Reassigned, supposedly. New identities, some kind of rehabilitation program. "You believe that?" Webb's expression was grim. "I want to. But these were kids who'd been turned into weapons. You don't just undo that kind of conditioning with therapy and a new passport. So she's out there somewhere. Maybe. Or maybe she's still doing the same job under a different name for different handlers. Or maybe..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Hayes never saw Harper Vance again. But 3 years later, he received a letter. No return address. Postmarked from Portland, Oregon. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Lieutenant Hayes, you probably don't remember me. We met in Afghanistan. You gave me a patch. I never took it. I'm writing to tell you that you were right. What they did to me wasn't okay, and I'm trying to find another way. It's hard. Harder than combat, in some ways. I don't know how to be a person instead of a weapon. I don't know how to sleep without checking my perimeter. I don't know how to talk to people my age who haven't seen what I've seen, but I'm trying. I'm in college now, studying engineering. Turns out I'm good at math. You probably could have guessed that. Sometimes I still wake up at night and reach for a rifle that isn't there. Sometimes I see someone who looks like one of the targets, and my hands start shaking. Sometimes I think about going back because at least there I knew who I was. But I don't go back. Because you were right about something else, too. There has to be an after. I'm 17 now. Actually 17, not the lie I told before. And I'm trying to figure out what 17 is supposed to feel like when you've already lived 3 lifetimes. Thank you for treating me like a person that day. Not a weapon, not a ghost, a person. I don't know if I'll ever really be one, but I'm trying." Hayes read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer, next to the seal patch he'd tried to give her. He never heard from her again. But sometimes, late at night, he liked to imagine her in a college classroom, taking notes, solving equations, living a normal life, being 17 the way 17 was supposed to be. It probably wasn't true. Life rarely worked out that neatly, especially for child soldiers trying to reintegrate into society. But it was a good dream, and in a world full of ghosts and snow, and 12 bodies cooling in a valley, Hayes figured he was entitled to at least one good dream. 5 years after the mission, Hayes was teaching a tactical course at Coronado. He was explaining sniper operations to a class of new SEAL candidates when one of them raised a hand. "Sir, is it true there was once a mission where a teenage sniper saved an entire SEAL team?" The room went quiet. Hayes considered his answer carefully. "Where did you hear that?" "Urban legend, sir. Some of the instructors talk about it. Say there was this kid, couldn't have been more than 16, who dropped 12 hostiles in a blizzard and walked away like it was nothing." The other candidates were listening now, leaning forward. "They say she was part of some Black Ops program." Another candidate chimed in. "Child soldiers, but American." Hayes set down the marker he'd been using on the whiteboard. "Let me tell you what I know," he said. "I know that in war, people do extraordinary things under extraordinary circumstances. I know that training and talent don't always correlate with age. And I know that the line between hero and victim can be very thin." He paused. "I also know that if such a person existed, if there was a 15-year-old girl who saved 8 men's lives in the mountains of Afghanistan, she would deserve better than to be an urban legend. She would deserve to be a person, to have a life, to be more than the sum of her confirmed kills." The classroom was silent. "So no, I can't confirm that story. But I can tell you this. Age doesn't determine who's a warrior. Courage doesn't have a birth certificate. And if you ever find yourself in a position where someone saves your life, you don't laugh at them, you don't question them, you say thank you, and you remember that they're human too." He turned back to the whiteboard. "Now, let's talk about wind compensation at extended ranges." The class continued, but Hayes could feel the candidates exchanging glances. They thought they knew the story. They didn't. They didn't know about the tremor in her hands when the shooting stopped. They didn't know about the exhaustion that made each step an act of will. They didn't know about the eyes that had seen too much and the voice that spoke of an after that never came. They didn't know that she was 15, not 17. They didn't know her name was Harper. And they didn't know that sometimes, late at night, Hayes still wondered if she was okay. After class, Webb found him in the office. You told them. I told them enough. Webb nodded, understanding. You think she made it? Really made it? Hayes pulled out his desk drawer and looked at the letter one more time. I think she's trying. And that's more than a lot of people get. You ever try to find her? Check if she's really in college somewhere? Why not? Because if she wanted me to know where she was, she would have told me. And if she didn't want me to know, then I have no right to go looking. Webb was quiet for a moment. Then, for what it's worth, I think about her too. Every time I see snow, actually. Weird how that works. Not that weird. She saved our lives. Yeah, but it's more than that. She made me realize how much I'd let assumptions cloud my judgment. I saw a kid and assumed incompetence. I should have seen a professional and judged her by her actions. We all made that mistake. But she never did. She saw us as teammates, from the start, even when we didn't see her that way. Hayes closed the drawer. You know what I hope? What? I hope she's not reading about wind compensation and bullet trajectories anymore. I hope she's studying something completely different. Art history, maybe. Or music. Something that has nothing to do with killing. You think she could really walk away from it, after that much training? I think people are capable of change if they want it badly enough. Webb smiled slightly. When did you become an optimist? The day I watched a 15-year-old girl drop 12 terrorists in a blizzard and then tell me she didn't have a choice about who she was. If she could carry that rifle across those mountains, she can carry herself into a new life. Harper Vance graduated from Portland State University with a degree in civil engineering. She specialized in infrastructure reconstruction in post-conflict zones. She never touched a rifle again. But she never forgot how, either. On clear winter days, when the snow fell soft and quiet over Portland, she would stand at her apartment window and remember a different snow, heavier, colder, painted red. She was 23 now, actually 23, according to her real birth certificate, the one the government had helped her obtain when they shut down the program. She had friends, a boyfriend who knew about her past but didn't define her by it, a therapist who specialized in combat trauma. She still had nightmares. She still checked the perimeter before she slept. She still saw targets instead of people sometimes, just for a flash before her brain corrected itself. But she also laughed now. Real laughter, not the hollow sound that used to escape her lips. She cried at movies. She got angry about normal things like traffic and late buses. She felt joy when she aced an exam or completed a project. She was becoming a person. It was slow, painful, like learning to walk on a broken leg that had healed wrong and needed to be rebroken to set properly. But she was doing it. And when people asked about the small scar on her hand, the one from a bolt that had cut her finger during that mission in the mountains, she just smiled and said it was from an accident when she was young. Because all of it was an accident. A bombing that killed her parents, an orphanage that got attacked, a government program that turned children into weapons, a mountain where she saved 8 lives by taking 15 others. All accidents. But what came after the decision to try, to change, to become more than what they'd made her that wasn't an accident, that was choice. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. On February 14th, her actual birthday, not the one on the fake paperwork, she turned 24. Her boyfriend threw her a surprise party. Small, just close friends, pizza and cheap wine and terrible karaoke. Someone asked her to make a wish before blowing out the candles. She thought about it for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes and wished that somewhere, in some valley far away, there were no more ghosts in the snow. No more children carrying rifles too big for their bodies. No more laughter that died when the shooting started. Just snow. Clean, white, untouched. She blew out the candles. And for the first time in 10 years, she believed her wish might actually come true.